Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I wanted to start by thanking John McCabe and Sanford Unger. I used to travel around as a reporter for a trade publisher and then for the Wall Street Journal in the South and Midwest. And I had this printed page from U.S. News and World Report, which was an ad from NPR, and it told you whatever station NPR was on in Oklahoma City or Omaha or Edina, Minnesota, and I always tuned in to All Things Considered at NPR, and Sanford Unger is like an old friend whom I met an hour ago. So really appreciate that and all the organization. I think this is a great idea, and wherever and whenever you do it in future, Lenfest Institute would like to be involved. Our topic today in the program is AI and free speech. At John's suggestion, we broadened that to include free speech, but AI and democracy, the functioning of democracy. We want to look at both the challenges and the opportunities created by this massive new technology. I'm going to introduce the panel in a moment, but I wanted to start with the massive part. And we believe, or I'm one who believes, that this technology is as disruptive, as important, and as consequential as the original advent of the internet, in the consumer internet in kind of the mid to late 1990s. The reason I say that is that ChatGPT alone, a leading, not the sole, new consumer app for AI, has reached 700 million weekly users in 2 years. And it is banned from one of the largest countries on earth, China, and this is to say this is the fastest growing consumer product and consumer software technology we have ever seen, and obviously one of the most powerful. So with that, we wanted to look comprehensively and kind of multidisciplinarily at this issue. Matt Boggie and I are both from the media, as is Danya. Senator Tracy Pennycuick is a government official, and Professor Logan Molyneux is a professor here at Temple. I work at the Lenfest Institute for Journalism. We are the nonpartisan, nonprofit, and non-controlling owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer. The controlling piece is important because we'll talk about kind of who controls AI, who controls very large media like X, and what that means going forward. Our structure is to prevent that kind of influence and manipulation in support of democracy. Danya Henninger, I met first as an entrepreneur and a really terrific one, a site called Billy Penn, which she grew almost from birth to a thriving teenager, and after which she was recruited to be the editor-in-chief of Technically Media, which is a multi-city, mid-Atlantic news and information service that serves economic development and covers technology. And as such has been a leader in the use of and reporting on artificial intelligence. Matt Boggie is the Chief Technology and Product Officer at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and he came to us from a series of jobs, including the Chief Technology Officer position at Axios, one of the most successful new startups, not so new anymore, in media, and I'm not sure if it was prior to that or after that, the R&D head at the New York Times before that. Logan, you should describe which part of the Klein College of Media and Communications you serve and how the job has evolved since we've last been together, but you're professor of X.
Yeah, they hired me in an emerging media and technology line in the journalism department, right. And now I'm chair of the journalism department.
So. Oh, good for you. Congratulations. And that was all on the basis of being named to this panel?
Yeah, pretty much.
Where it gets out. And last and really certainly not least, and we really appreciate your being here, Senator Tracy Pennycuick comes from Montgomery County and represents Montgomery County in the Pennsylvania State Senate. She chairs the Senate Communications and Technology Committee, and this is the committee that's in charge of regulation and policy at the state level for issues that include AI. And without too heavy a hand, I think has been proposing and championing legislation that helps control, regulate, and make the best of artificial intelligence. And I'll ask in a moment for you to describe that better than I just did.
Sure.
We want to begin by talking about some of the potential liabilities and some of the scary stuff that is inherent in a brand new technology, and one that is so ubiquitous and so powerful. And then we'll move to solutions, particularly around either regulatory solutions or good news surrounding the use of the technology for leveling the playing field, providing access to public information, and helping the democratic process if that's possible. And I'll start with the question, I think, for Matt. When we had our pre-meeting, you said AI can make bad behavior very easy. Things can go wrong, or people can say and do things that appear quite credible at great scale. Explain.
Sure. And I think this gets to your question on what are some of the biggest dangers, the things that we worry about the most. There's a popular idea that AI will eventually evolve to the point where, will eventually evolve to the point where it will have agency and will be able to take action, and eventually that will lead to Skynet and the end of the world and all sorts of apocalyptic visions and stuff like that.
But some great movies, right?
And some good movies. It's very zen, that one. I don't think that's realistic, but I do think for the purposes of today, the thing that scares me most is something that we first started to encounter more than 5 years ago. I teach a course at Stanford with Emily Bell from Columbia about the business of journalism, and one of the things we've been studying through that and the work that she does at CJR is through this idea of pink slime. That is news that looks like news, it looks like it's coming from a real site, a real reporter, real conditions like that, but is not, and is only being put forward for the purposes of creating public opinion or priming a conversation or creating some other false awareness in an audience. And previously, there were lots of different techniques and tools that you could use for this, but you had to be a pretty decent programmer to do the kinds of natural language work that you would need to do to make a fake story sound real. Now that's trivial. You ask a simple question, you get the story in response, and you almost can automate the creation of hundreds, if not thousands, of these sorts of sites all over the world on any issue you'd like. And it breaks our ability as information consumers to use our usual tools against this kinds of information. Is it well laid out? Is it grammatically correct? Is the argument compelling? All of those things can be done for free instantly now. And so where previously you could kind of get a sense that this person's a little bit of a crank because it's laid out funny, or the words they're using aren't quite what I would expect, or the argument's a bit rambling, we don't have those tools here anymore. And so to be able to very quickly create compelling and misinforming material like that is a real danger.
The Lenfest Institute commissioned a study of a group called NewsGuard, which was started by my ex-Wall Street Journal publisher, Gordon Krovitz, and the founder of Court TV, Steve Brill, which is a watchdog service, for-profit actually, for mis and disinformation. We asked them to examine 200 sites identifying as news sites in the state of Pennsylvania. They identified 38 sites that were fake, masquerading, so-called pink slime sites, most of them on the right, notably not all of them. Most of them from a company called Metric Media, which does this at scale. And this was, I think, pre-AI. So the ability to do that at scale very, very cheaply has only accelerated. There was an example I think you brought up, or maybe Danya, about a quote Joe Biden deepfake robocall in New Hampshire during the New Hampshire primary. Does that ring a bell?
That wasn't mine, I don't think. But
can you describe that, and then I'm going to ask you some other questions.
Yeah, sure. It's not just writing that the AI can now spoof in a realistic way, and so it was, before, when Joe Biden was still running, and people were saying, don't go, there was robocalls sent out to Democratic voters who saying, this is Joe Biden, the best thing for me would be if you stay home and don't vote today, in the primary, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
And that was, a lot of, I think it's unclear, I haven't read any studies of how many votes that actually affected, but if you have the voice and you have the cadence of somebody that you trust, voice has been around for a while, now it's video as well. And I wanted to also say an example that there's now a disconnect between you have an idea and you have something well worded to say about it is public comments on legislation are apparently being essentially spammed, but spammed with commentary that is like, you can't really distinguish it at first look from a real comment. There was we did a story, semi-report did a story in DC on the proposal at the federal level to reclassify marijuana to a lower schedule, to reschedule it, had something like 10,000 comments that they assumed that some of them there was some pattern in some of them that, that they were not all individually written, but it was very hard to tell because of the generative AI.
So if we were to coin a phrase like flood the zone, your contention would be that no matter who's flooding the zone, right or left or independent, the ability to do so detrimentally is increased by AI.
Yeah, right. I think, as Matt said, it breaks our current systems of, judgment.
Yeah. We're going to come back in a few minutes to the ways in which we've seen AI, at least at the test level, help with reporting on school boards and council meetings and translating public transcripts into multiple languages, and so that this is not all doom and gloom. But I must say some of it is scary in the wrong hands. Logan, how do you think about this as an academic topic in teaching journalism? A tool for journalists to be more effective and efficient, a tool for mis and disinformation to flood young minds, a tool for kids to not do their homework and just turn in AI papers, exaggerating for effect. Give us sort of a sense of how you think about it, and then we'll dig in on one or two of those topics.
Okay. We worry about all of those things, yeah. Obviously. I'll tell you a couple of things that have crossed my mind as I've thought about this issue. One of them is that the kinds of free speech that our founders sought to protect when they used the word press or freedom of speech existed at the time, and they could not have foreseen the things that are here. But from 250 years ago or whatever, when newspapers began until our day, journalism has as one of its core missions the goal of providing public information. And it hasn't always done that very well. It's relied on various forms of commercialization in order to carry out that mission, but it has never given up that mission, right? AI, on the other hand, is founded primarily as an investment opportunity, and it's here as a business, right? The goal is to provide the best product possible, and free speech just isn't a concern, right? And so that's one thing that's really worrisome to me, because I'm not so much concerned, like Matt was saying, that we're going to have Skynet, but that AI speech is going to replace some human speech, and that we will lose the ability to comment on public referenda, or that we will lose the ability to connect to one another as humans.
Apropos of that, there's some technology assists like speed dial that I know like 2 or 3 phone numbers now. I know my wife and my son. I don't remember my brother's telephone number. I don't need to. I can be a lot less concerned about spelling because there's spell check. To what, as a professor of journalism, to what degree do you worry about the ability to write originally atrophying or to do research originally?
It's a really good question. A lot of the ways that AI is being used now is to answer questions.
Yep.
Recent research from the Reuters Institute suggests that asking and answering questions is now a primary use. Seeking information
Yep.
Of AI rather than just like generating random blocks of text. And this is interesting because a lot of people worry about AI's impact on people's ability to produce journalism, but I'm concerned about its impact on people's ability to consume journalism. When they search for something,
right,
much of that information is coming from a journalistic source. They're the ones that went out and they found the information, they gathered it originally, they provided it, they wrote it up, or they presented it in a television model, and then ChatGPT links them to that information. They don't actually go to the website and get it, they just read it there in the thing. So journalism is more like the input of AI than it is like the output.
That's very interesting. And I'm going to turn to Senator Pennycuick. And I guess at a high level, where do you think government belongs in the conversation about AI and regulation and corporate power and activity, and where does it not?
So we've really taken the approach of not stifling innovation, but protecting the consumer.
Right.
So one of the first things that came up was actually out of the Lancaster County Day School. A young man took 20 images of the junior tennis team, the girls' junior tennis team, and he turned them into pornographic images. And it wasn't the old Photoshop that you could see it was glued together, and that was bad. The school did not notify their mandatory reporters. They did not notify. And it got worse when 6 months later he was able to produce, with a couple clicks of an AI program, pornographic videos. So these 20 ladies were victimized twice. The district attorney said, there's really not a law on the books. No one could foresee that AI-generated child pornography was going to be a problem. They couldn't prosecute. So we now have Act 125 of 2024 is on the books, making it illegal to produce AI-generated child pornography.
Let me just pause for a second.
We've taken that one step further in Pennsylvania to go to deep fakes, and you talked about deep fakes in 10 seconds of a voice. They can spoof a conversation. They can spoof a video. It's now illegal in Pennsylvania to do that. And that protects politicians, celebrities, and it's really important that you as an individual own your own image, and you can't let that be manipulated. One of the concerns that I see with AI is journalists like yourselves, your written word becomes part of the AI database, and you no longer own your product. And that's an issue that we're looking at very closely. So we're trying really hard to protect consumers, protect journalists, but we don't want to stifle innovation. We don't want to over-regulate. We don't want to regulate to the point where people are like, ugh. We really want companies to, be ethical, do the right thing, but we want to protect our consumers.
Interesting. And knowing just a little bit about your work and your committee's work, a lot of it has to do with broadband access.
Yes.
And at the core, in the state that is home to Comcast and by far the largest broadband access provider in the country, a lot of your work is driven by equity as well as consumer safety and consumer rights, so hats off for that.
Yes, it's amazing in Montgomery County and Berks County where I represent, you would think, oh, we're well-to-do counties, and we actually have areas that do not have broadband access. And it's critical. I mean, you go to the doctors online, you make appointments online. It's just absolutely important that we get that done.
Logan, when you think about the Academy and your work, the recent expansion of your work, where do you think Temple University is on the teaching and kind of pursuit of excellence and at least knowledge and research on AI, and where would you like to see it move faster? And really kind of I'm wondering in particular if there's cross-disciplinary activity between like journalism and engineering, journalism and computer science, because it's the intersection where a lot of these things are happening.
I guess unfortunately we're barely getting started on some of these things.
Right.
This is probably a better question for my provost, David Boardman, who you also know, because he's started an initiative to try to figure out what we should be doing with AI. There's some committees that are talking to, you know how universities work,
right.
It's always a committee. But they're trying to understand what are the interests across the various departments,
okay.
and then bring those interests together so that people can try to understand where to go next.
There are several themes there. I've heard the same thing from Northwestern, the same thing from Stanford, the same thing from Berkeley. We've had...
Well, that's comforting to a degree.
They're all saying the technology is moving faster than we are. In a way, that's what you just said, Senator, about the technology outstripping the law. Something, again, is clearly bad, like AI-assisted child pornography. There just is no law, and we need to catch up. So that was one theme. And another theme in those conversations is this notion of cross-disciplinary skills that mix departments and even kind of anthropology and a whole collection of things. It's bigger than one department.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been a focus at the university, but I don't think I'm in a position to say we've achieved it yet.
Yeah. You're in good company,
yeah.
and including in journalism. I wanted to spend just a few minutes on a wonderful and very fortunate program that the Lenfest Institute has been engaged in, and Matt has been a great partner on. We thought that the expertise and the resources and certainly the capital for AI development in news would most likely come from Microsoft, OpenAI, and others. We had seen in the past that when there is a new technology, when Facebook was new, there's a moment when they feel very generous and want to partner. And I think sometimes with one eye on regulatory concerns and so forth, but genuine. So we have raised $5 million from OpenAI and Microsoft, and $5 million in credits and cloud storage and things like this, kind of enabling soft dollars to put fellowships in 10 news organizations: ProPublica, the Boston Globe, a collection of other newspapers, a nonprofit called the Baltimore Banner, and most notably the Philadelphia Inquirer. And the idea is to use AI much less to affect the news, but much more to affect the business sustainability of the overall process. And sort of AI for the business of journalism. And maybe you can describe what you've been doing, and with Dewey, and then be sure to mention, if you would, the AI for public data and information, because that's some of the good news in the democracy realm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really great experience so far. We're about halfway through this fellowship. It's a 2-year program. We're about a year in. And it's been fascinating because at the beginning of the process, we had what I would call medium ambition goals. I realized that sometimes work will get in the way, and so I didn't want to overpromise on the grant. So we're like, we'll set up a system that looks over our archive and helps our reporters find old stories and better understand the coverage that we've done before, and focus entirely internally on a use case that really helps out a lot of our reporters and editors on a day-to-day basis. We were done with that project in the first month and a half or so. And not done. You're never really done. There's a lot we can do to expand on it, but we were like 80% of the way there. Had all the content scanned, had something in front of people, which I think is a testament to the way that these applications can work. What we've now done is to move into other areas where we see a need to take a large amount of usually unstructured information and get that into a reporter's hands as quickly as possible so that they can begin to essentially interview that information. Best example of this is we are expanding a lot of our coverage into local areas. We're going deeper into a couple of key neighborhoods around the Philadelphia area, as well as potentially expanding out into other regions in the area.
Like Montgomery County.
Potentially, yeah, on the list. And one of the processes we needed to do there was to get really engaged with the local communities. Where are the school board meetings happening? Where are the city council meetings happening? Is there a next door community? Is there a Facebook group that we should start monitoring for questions or news that is coming out of this? We can use to follow up and sort of begin a reporting process, again, with a human who can then take that clue and carry it forward and create a story out of it. And so that's really been a lot of our focus right now, is building that dragnet, essentially. And now we're looking at 30 different sources in that team every day. What's going on? What should we be covering? What do we want to bring to people? And what's been great about that is that we're not only promoting our own work, but in many of these areas there may be a local blog or a newsletter or some other, very hyper-local, almost like labor of love. We're able to provide more links and direct traffic into that experience as well, to say that there's a valuable neighborhood resource here and we think more people should know about it. So that's been really great. At a macro level, I think what this has taught us so far about the tech is a lot of the concerns that we have for misuse, for the ways that these tools may be used to confuse each other or to build propaganda. It's so much a factor of the fact that the product was essentially released without any thinking to everyone immediately. There was no safety study done. There was no Consumer Product Safety Commission in here. There was no research protocol that you had to follow. You simply put this product out into the world and said, try it and see what it does for you. And some people found a lot of utility in it, and some people went mad. And it seems like there could have been a moment where we had a conversation that said, as a society, are we ready for this? And what are some of the implications that it might have? Because frankly, our experience of very slowly and deliberately talking to stakeholders within the Inquirer, understanding what their needs were, understanding really deeply what the technology was good at and what it wasn't, and then being able to put those two ideas together. What is it good at and what do we need to solve? Has led to much more fruitful conversations and a much greater understanding of what the technology is for. I liken it to in the 40s if we had just released instructions on how to make your own home nuclear reactor. A lot of people would have done great things with those, and a few of them would have blown themselves up. And I don't think that would have been a responsible way to deploy
and their neighbors as well.
Right.
One of the things I respect a lot about Danya and her partner, Chris Wink, and Technically Media is that they eat their own cooking. And you're both covering AI as a business tool, business phenomena in your region's startup world, and also applying it to your work. Could you talk about kind of each of those buckets?
Yeah, dog food. Dog food's great.
Yeah.
Yes, and I also want to maybe raise a counterpoint to Matt's idea, just that in covering, we cover entrepreneurialism and basically the free market and the way that, our society works. And maybe something like that would have worked in Denmark or something, but it doesn't, most of the world doesn't work that way. There are always bad actors out there. There are always people who are going to prioritize profit over people. And so you can't say like, gosh, it would have been nice if we talked about it before they released this product. I mean, you can say it obviously, but to me, it strikes me as unrealistic. And instead, because of that, I feel like we have to use the tools and not just cede them their use to bad actors. Like the idea that, journalism has always had trouble capturing its value, but the idea that like we're gonna protect news sources by not letting the AI bots scrape them, it's like, well then people aren't gonna get the information because people are gonna go to the easy chatbots to ask the questions, and that's where they're getting the information. So for Logan's point of like, he's worried that journalism won't be an input anymore, like it's an input to AI, and then people aren't coming to our websites anymore. Well, we're going to have to find new business models that incentivize and support the effort into information gathering and not the attention itself. Like right now we're in this attention economy. I think we're going to have to move to an effort economy, at least for funding newsrooms. And that goes to what Technically is doing. And our business model, because we report on like local tech and entrepreneurship, it's a very niche thing in multiple cities. It's like double niche, local and a specific beat. We're never going to get a huge audience. So our business model does not rely on page views or even like just bring people down the funnel to our newsletter. In our newsletter, it's important to us to have an engaged audience and an owned platform, and that's what our newsletter is about. But I said at the Lenfest Summit this spring that we really are increasingly thinking of our reporting as a wire service for where people are getting information today. And that is, a lot of that is the chatbots. It's also like creators. So yeah.
I'm going to give it a time warning that I'm going to need to leave in a few minutes, as I've talked to the organizers about, to get on a train to go to a really wonderful event, however, in New York, the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press event tonight, and then at which point Danya is going to lead the panel, so I really appreciate that. Senator, there has been, over the years, a fair amount of government policy and infrastructure, most of it federal, around media ownership consolidation. You could only own so many television stations. That may be under pressure. You couldn't own a television station and a major newspaper in the same market. I think Rupert Murdoch took care of that one. We now have there's a level of concentration that the amount of traffic, eyeballs, and kind of hands-on control that Elon Musk has over X, and the way that was applied to electoral politics, the president's own medium, Truth Social, the potential aggregation of Paramount, which is CBS News and a lot of other things, Warner Brothers Discovery, which is CNN and a lot of other things, and some purported operating control over TikTok, which is arguably the largest news medium on earth, in the hands of Oracle controlling shareholder Ellison family. Does this scare you? And I don't know that government can do much about it when the government in control of it is in favor of it. But what do you think?
So it does concern me.
Yeah.
You have to, and it's funny, I had this conversation with my kids about where they get their news.
Yeah.
And they're the 30-second blurb on TikTok or Instagram or wherever. I think we need to make sure that there's an even playing field.
Yeah.
And that every voice can be heard. But you've got to search for it.
Yeah.
You've got to want to search that out, because if you just turn on the regular TV channel, you'll get a view of one side versus the other. And I tell everyone I talk to, listen, you need to go to like 5 or 6 different sources to get a well-rounded picture of the story. And that's what I like about different media. I love to go to foreign media and see what their perception of what's happening in the U.S. is. Very, very different. But I think we need to make sure that there is not these monopolies and a few people are controlling the media. Because it's very skewed. It's very biased.
So we have probably 3 product-oriented people on the stage. Product meaning the building of the user experience and the technology for the delivery and consumption of news, in addition to the actual content. Do you think there's an AI use case that is an AI assistant for me to review comprehensively those 5 sources that I consider important and credible on any given day, produce a newsletter for me, and do what the senator does with staff and a clipping service and just her own reading automatically. Could that be is that a use case or something positive that we could strive for?
Well, absolutely, and I think there's a lot of those products that exist today. I think
And have existed for decades.
Exactly, yeah. Those are around, and I think they're getting better with these kinds of technologies. But I think, as Danya alluded to, that does put the individual publisher and their reporters in the position of essentially feeding that beast.
Yeah.
Right? We no longer have that relationship with that reader in the same way. I was struck, we've had a lot of conversations with several of these companies, and some are now starting to talk about things like, B2B relationships, essentially. So if somebody has a relationship with the Inquirer already, they can log in with us, and then they can get all that data back through ChatGPT, which is great, but that's one generation. That is that person and no one else, because now we have completely cut off discovery for new audiences and the ability to grow that.
Right, and we've made that mistake before, have we not?
Absolutely.
Interesting. Again, I'm sort of in the positive credits versus debits column here. AI can ingest every school board meeting that's on YouTube, every transcript that's in the public domain. Can it not tell me if I'm interested as a reporter, as an individual, every time "don't say gay," book banning, critical race theory is mentioned at the Montgomery County XYZ meeting? I've heard more recently about its ability to detect when voices get raised, when people talk more quickly, when they get angry, and alert reporters, something happened at minute 3.5 on YouTube, go look. How do you feel about those kind of assistants, and are they good for democracy? You don't have to show up as a reporter, for one thing.
It definitely helps us scale our impact. It helps us reach audiences we wouldn't have reached otherwise, and with stories that we wouldn't have been able to cover otherwise. I think it definitely improves on our ability to reach our audience in a really compelling and positive way. And I think the way that we do that, to continue to have reporters in that loop, is critical. You could take a system like that and add another layer on it and say, you know what, just write the story for me. I don't even need to take a look at it. You figured out what the last 4 things to happen are. You have the recording, go right ahead.
Right.
And that, I think, is where we really begin to lose. These systems are statistically designed to give you the average response. They will never have a new idea, therefore.
Yeah.
And so to be able to introduce a human who can synthesize something is critical.
And I would say also, I wasn't so concerned about your description of what was happening until you said, then the reporter might not even show up.
Right.
And I think us as human beings, one of the ways that we respond most quickly and demonstrate accountability most consistently is when another person is watching and our reputation is on the line, right? And so part of, I think, what journalists offer to the world is just the ability to be there in the room while something is happening, while the decision is being made, and letting them know that somebody's paying attention.
I guess one way I would, well said, I would summarize before I open it to questions and to Danya with apologies, is that the effects of AI on American democracy, which was John's charge for this panel, are decidedly mixed and decidedly ambivalent. And it's not that it could go either way so much as it will go both ways. And this is simply the latest challenge that our democracy at age 250 will hopefully live through. Many of those, the previous challenges have been tempered, if not solved, by the presence of what we call the fourth estate, the judiciary, the executive, the legislative, and the press. So I'm proud to be a part of the last piece and proud to be working with all of you, whether on the technology, the media piece, or the regulatory piece. And with that, excuse me, and questions.
Yeah, so if there are questions in the audience, we can take them. We have a mic out there that's going to be floating. Cool, so we go over to Sean and Amir.
So I know you talked a little bit about, the senator talked about some of the laws that have been passed to try to protect against kind of bad actors with generative AI and things of that nature. And when I think about, and I thought it was important to watch, but didn't really appreciate the Mountainhead movie that was out not too long ago, and it was about generative AI and folks creating crises that were fake. And just a question as we look at different ways to engage and use AI, are we also, to your knowledge and things that you've seen, looking at ways to, either protect or signal that something is AI generated and all of those? What are the kind of protections that you know of that have been started to be generated?
So I will tell you that right now we have a bill, and I want to make sure that I have the right number. The AI disclosure bill, and it's by Senator Piscitano, and it basically requires labeling. This product is made using artificial intelligence. We do not want someone to chat GPT an entire book or a movie or a song.
Too late.
Exactly. But consumers need to know that something is created using artificial intelligence. So that bill will be coming to my committee end of October. And I think that's really important because right now, if you watch the evening news and the meteorologist does their thing, that's all AI. You're talking to the chat bot online with your bank, that's AI. We need to let people know that. But this also gets back to an education piece for the average consumer. The average consumer goes AI, I'm kind of afraid. I don't know what that means. So just like the internet, and you're way too young to know, when the internet showed up, people were like, wait a minute, what does this do? Same with AI. It's an education process and getting the public to know what the tool is used for and how it can be beneficial, but also what the pitfalls are and what the downfalls are.
I feel like the literacy demands are really high.
Yeah, I mean, the danger there, I just want to add, is that everything right now uses AI. But also, spell check. Are we going to have to disclose? I think in my opinion, there should be laws because we're going to have to stress test them. We've got to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
But the danger is that technology moves so fast and adoption has been moving faster than anything in history that if it's ubiquitous, then where is the disclosure needed? Does Grammarly, if you use Grammarly in writing, an article, does that need a disclosure?
Well, it's consumer protection, so it wouldn't.
Yeah.
If that makes you feel better. But I think you're right. We do have to get out there and almost try to catch up to AI. The federal government is failing miserably at doing that. So I'm really proud that Pennsylvania, we've got a great committee, bipartisan. Believe it or not, AI doesn't know politics, at least not in Pennsylvania. And we're really working hard to make sure that we're looking at those issues as they come up. And it's almost daily. I mean, we just had, Denmark just came up with copyright protection for artists. Well, we want to do that here. We don't want to see authors and poets, and we don't want their information, their products stolen, basically by AI.
Or for them to leave and go live in Denmark, where it's safe.
You'll have to leave and go live in Denmark.
Demir?
Thank you. You mentioned effort economy as a transition point from attention economy. Are there areas of effort that you have noticed are expanding as the AI use is expanding for the panel?
I could start, which I think the rise of the creator economy is in part, I think it started really before ChatGPT came on the scene, but I think is a reaction to the AI, the idea that news already had a trust problem, but the idea that now it could be anything you want to hear from a person themselves. So TikTok and, on the other social media platforms, I think it has incentivized people to, it's not easy to do that. Of course, now there's going to be AI avatar creators, and they won't be putting effort in it. But I think you see the zooming up of TikTok as a news source because of people who are there talking first person and making the videos behind them. They are putting effort into that.
The parasocial relationship part of it is what makes it so strong, right?
What he said.
But what concerns me is that this has been a flood of people propagating news and not a flood of people gathering news, right? If anything, it's diminished the number of people that are gathering the news because there's not the money in it.
Yeah.
Or at least it doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, I mean, so we need to find a way, news orgs are going to very quickly have to find a way to monetize that effort.
Well, and even in that case, this gets back to your literacy point, the ground is shifting so quickly that what was solid yesterday is no longer. So the effort point, exactly that. We've been saying that for a while. Let's get our reporters in front of cameras. Let's get them out into the world and talk to people and, show that. We now have AI-generated actors and avatars that are just as good, literally being signed by talent agencies and cast into TV and movies. So authenticity is really difficult. We talk about deepfake video generation.
Yep.
Sam Altman just earlier this week announced that they have plans at OpenAI to allow verified people of the appropriate age to create that on their platform as a product feature. And so what was, a bad actor, maybe now a CEO.
Correct.
Advocating for that. And the technology itself continues to change. What was possible, is now possible today, wasn't possible last week, and a whole new thing will be next week. And, we're constantly trying to move quickly to catch up, and it is a very difficult race.
I have a follow-up question, but Sherry, can we get Sherry a mic?
Very interesting conversation. I was wondering, are we at a place where we need to reevaluate how we evaluate people? And Logan, I have this question for you because, our students, the papers don't work anymore. A paper is not a good evaluation tool for our students because they use ChatGPT to write the paper. And everybody's using AI now to generate their resumes, and then they get the job, and Forbes did a whole thing where people are getting fired because you said all the right things in the resume, then you get in there and you don't know how to do squat diddly do. And so what does that look like? I mean, people are becoming very facile with the tools, but lack actual real knowledge and ability. And I think about journalists, it's certain things you just can't fake your way out of, right? AI can't save you from certain things. And I wonder if there's some type of regulation that can go into that, some thought you've given as we train the next generation up on how to evaluate their knowledge of a thing.
Yeah, the essay was like the primary tool for the longest time, right? And I think there's been some conversations already about moving away from that and toward other things that seem anachronistic now, but maybe are more viable in this age. Things like oral exams, right? And practical examinations where you have to demonstrate a certain set of skills. This is the way that academia worked in medieval times, and we all stand around and ask and answer questions of each other. And maybe it's an appropriate time to return to that in order to evaluate what we know.
And just to piggyback on that, this has been an issue in recruiting for technology positions for a very long time. Not just with AI, but things like basic search, being able to find the answer to a question and grab the code and copy it in. And so I and my team have been especially pushing more toward that in-person kind of an evaluation. And even abstracting away the language, we don't necessarily even want an engineer to come in and code. We just want to have a conversation about how you would structure this problem. And then we know you will have a plethora of tools to help you actually build that code. But if you don't know how to structure it to begin with, then we have a problem. And I think there are similar ways that we could evaluate skills, but it really does come down to what is the skill and knowledge that you're trying to evaluate, and what is the best mechanism to actually interrogate that in an individual.
We have a question just related. I'm the positive side to me of what it's going to do to pedagogy, is that how you pronounce it, pedagogy, is that it's going to force us to reinvent pedagogy away from rote memorization, which, the progressive education has been working that way, but this is going to be a forcing factor in that. So we should rethink pedagogy. And
maybe that's good.
So I think that's the silver lining here. Yeah, that's my posit.
Do you think there will also be with all AI you're sort of talking about, how we're evaluating people and whatnot? Do you think that there might have to be maybe a social change as well, and just how we interpret what kind of media we get? Because I feel there's a lot of people, at least my age, where we're going to be honest, even if it's quick and easy, I don't really want to listen to AI music, or I don't want to read an AI article. I would much rather go in person and watch it that way. Do you think that there might be a social change, a push, not back against it, but for these more authentic things, as kind of an answer to all this fake stuff that we see online?
Is this for me?
We were talking about us standing around in medieval times, so that's
Yeah. Okay. I would say we're beginning to see some of those things already, because I've heard of groups of young people who are putting away their phones and going on dates without any technology or something like that. These are the types of things that I think a lot of people would say represent our humanness one to another and our ability to connect, is that authenticity. If that's missing, then we don't get the same thing out of the music that we may be looking for. So I hope that all of that will always remain and that we won't lose our humanity along the way.
Yeah, I think it definitely goes in both directions, because on the one hand, as you said, it is a human expression. Behind music is a musician who is there to try to communicate some kind of an idea or feeling, fun or frivolous or what have you. But that is a relationship and is a connection. AI-generated art, if you will, doesn't have that same will to express. There's no motive. It's just something to look at. And so I think you will definitely find people who are seeking out those more authentic experiences. I also think there are going to be a lot of places where AI content is going to creep in a way that is completely welcomed and is unobtrusive. And you see this already happening on TikTok. I am sure that I have hit the heart on an AI-generated video or two, because the technology is getting so good. If I'm scrolling fast enough, I'm not going to notice. We've seen journalists over the last few weeks retweet content that was AI-generated or incorrect just because it was close enough. And I think you will also then begin to see this middle path of creators using tools like this to help accelerate their processes. So if you are an indie filmmaker and you're trying to make a special effect, you could just go to Sora and ask for that kinematic and get it back, and it would be fine in the rest of your very hand-drawn movie, for example.
Yeah, I think the prompts behind it, AI, just because music is AI generated doesn't mean it had no human thought behind it, because I know people who make AI music very purposely and do a lot of back and forth and thinking and rejiggering their prompts.
Right, and that sits somewhere in that middle space of
Right.
you have a creator who's using the tool to try to generate something, but then you also do have the sort of factories of just here's hundreds of tracks to go on Spotify and we'll see what wins.
And in that vein, technology can be an equalizer in some ways, so that maybe the in-person meeting, maybe the face-to-face meeting between people that younger generations are now craving, maybe it doesn't actually have to be physically face-to-face all the time, right? It's not the same to be in a Zoom meeting, and especially, and then we'll have virtual worlds, we'll have little meta world, not the company, but the metaverse, where we're with other humans, but we're not physically there. Because there are so many barriers that places that has led to a lot of the inequality in our country, especially being so big, the rural areas versus the city, and what you can achieve because you can connect with other people in your city physically. Well, tech can let us do that virtually, but maybe it's just, do you know that there's another human on the other end of that conversation? A question right behind you.
I'm concerned about the degradation of skills, because I feel like our society, as someone who works in communications for a living, I feel like there's less and less emphasis on writing. There's less and less emphasis on reading. I find even people my age who grew up reading and writing, the way that the media has changed us is people don't people who are readers don't read as much as they used to read. And I'm concerned that people, like kids, will never know how to write at all. That's like the worst case. I know that there's good things in AI also, but how do we preserve and respect important communication skills that are an important part of being human?
I'll start there. I think we have really good examples of this throughout academia. Think about learning math. You could have done all of that on your calculator from the very beginning, but you went through the arithmetic and trigonometry and geometry and eventually were handed a graphic calculator now that you had the rubrics and said, okay, you've got that. You don't have to do it by hand anymore. You can keep going. You see this as well in media production. Any media production application like Photoshop or a video editor often will use skeuomorphs that derive from when we were physically cutting tape or video or film, so that you can get a sense of what that technique is supposed to create. And then the software is actually emulating many of those more tried and true physical techniques. Hopefully with AI, we find ourselves in the same spot. And I would like to hope that we can learn from that and say, even though this tool exists, communicating with each other is a critical skill that we need to know for a million different reasons. There are going to be lots of places, for example, where we won't be able to consult with OpenAI and say, how am I going to respond to this? I need to be in the moment with you and have a conversation, right? Or I need to very quickly write my thoughts in a compelling way so that I can convince someone. AI is a shortcut to a lot of that. But I think we have to start with the pedagogy of these are the rubrics, this is where this all starts from, and if you don't get this, this won't make sense to you.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have to think about what is the really important thing that we're teaching people. Is it writing a sentence or is it the communication? And I think of, as an example, handwriting. When I have to write like a birthday card or something, I'm very bad at handwriting. I don't take, not like Matt, very, very nice and neat there. But I never write. And so it affects, but it doesn't really affect the way I communicate, no. But so in some sense, if they're taught how to communicate, it might not matter if they know how to write. I'm not saying that yet, but.
And also, I think it would be okay if some forms of communication were to die, right? Like the cursive or whatever, yes. Right? But also things like a 5-paragraph essay. Is that something that everyone needs to know? Maybe, or it was, but maybe it won't be.
It's responsible for a lot of bad writing, too.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
Good afternoon. Awesome panel. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the potential benefits to journalism from AI. Are there any fields of investigation that would lend themselves to getting at root issues because we can analyze data points in a more sophisticated way with fewer investigative resources?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I have a great example of this recently from the Minnesota Star Tribune. There was obviously mass shooting there, and they acquired a copy of the manifesto from the shooter. It had been written entirely in a language that the shooter had derived on his own. It was basically, the alphabet was kind of Cyrillic, sort of, but essentially it was all a code, it was a cipher. And the newsroom got a hold of it and needed to very quickly try to figure out what it was that it said. And because of the way the LLMs work, because they essentially abstract language into mathematical representations of meaning, they were able to use that tool to analyze this language that literally no one in the room had ever heard, spoken, or read. Wow. And turn that into enough material that they could get a sense of what this manifesto was about. It wasn't right in every case. There were a couple of places with mistranslations, but they went through that with their editors and recognized that. But that's an example of a story they never could have told in, even just a few months ago.
Yeah, and, that was an amazing story. I'm glad you're sharing it widely. Another example that I've seen or used in our newsroom is the amazing data set that is part of the Opportunity Insights research, Opportunity Atlas. Raj Chetty and the team at Opportunity Insights team out of Harvard partnered with the US Census, and they've been doing these analyses of economic mobility in every county and every neighborhood in the US. And you can search, it's online, you can go search, and you can even have a tool to compare two areas. But there's so much information there that it's hard to draw real analysis. Like, it would take a lot of time to draw an analysis, like analysis if we wanted to look at Maryland, the state of Maryland, and how does economic mobility differ across the state. And so we built a GPT to, like, where we fed all that data into it, and basically are asking it, like, what do you know, tell me the interesting things, what makes Maryland different, you know, what are the insights? And so that it gives us a starting point, at least, to then dive in. We still need the humans to go in and do the analysis and then talk to people who are actually affected. You know, you don't want to do just numbers, you want to tie it to real outcomes, so that's another way. Do you think I'm very curious about how it could be used in legislating?
Actually, we've had, I think, 6 or 8 different hearings, AI with agriculture, AI in education. But for us, my team uses it a lot to look at emerging legislation across the country and across the world, especially in AI. Because the data, I mean, there's 50 states, and then you look at the foreign, you know, the EU and you know, the Middle East. So they're using it a lot just to do the analysis of one law to another, and what are the long-term implications, and what are the economic implications of some of these, you know, what I would consider kind of to be restrictive laws. You know, people are afraid of AI in some areas of the world. You know, this is the boogeyman, and so we've got to, we do a lot of analysis using AI, and it saves us a ton of time.
I think that's so interesting to map. You know, 20 years ago, Iron Man came out and Tony Stark is like the hero, right?
Yeah.
And now so many recent examples, like the Superman movie, the tech entrepreneur is the bad guy, right? It's the villain.
Yep.
There was, you know, when social media was coming out, it's like, let's clear the way for all of this stuff to happen. And now legislators are going like, maybe we should pump the brakes.
It's very interesting, different views, but also, you know, Pennsylvania is looking at multiple data centers coming to Pennsylvania. We've got the natural resources, we have the infrastructure, and then when those data companies come to those local areas,
they're like, we don't want them.
We don't want them.
Oh,
and you're like, but you're looking at millions of dollars for your schools because they don't understand what a data center is. They don't understand the artificial intelligence. And it's an education process, but also it's a little bit of a leap of faith for that, you know, 70-plus-year-old farmer who, what do you mean you're going to put a data center in next to my farm? What does that mean for me? So there's a lot of education that has to go on, and we do that a lot with inner city, everyone. I mean, it's really interesting.
Oof, data centers. We have a question here. Yes, go for it. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what the panelists think about putting all of the ethical principles in the AI and creating a model where you have a kind of an ideal judge based on what it spits out. Removing the kind of subjective decision-making from the model and just basing some kind of judgment, you know, in some court based on what is determined in the model, and using that as a basis for making society more equitable and more just. Can we use it that? Can we imagine a world in which we can use it that way?
I'm going to say maybe not.
Well, the early, at the base of that, the models we have now are all trained on human output, and so human output has inherent biases in it, and so that is the kind of the flaw that I see at the root of that ideal. I'm not saying it could never happen, but right now, all of our AI, you know, LLMs essentially are trained on human content, and humans are horrible, you know. And even if they're not trying to be horrible, have inherent biases, and so that is all going to be reflected. Like, who, you know, history is told by the winners, right? And that's what the chatbots ingested in order to train, and even what they access in order to do retrieval augmented generation. Like, so even the news that's put out today is biased, not on purpose, and we're trying, so many of us are trying to reverse those biases by bringing more voices to the table, but it's still very biased what gets into the news and what gets into the training. So,
well, there's that issue, which I think is critical. And there's a second one too, which is that what is in one use case something that is evil or nefarious, and another isn't at all. I mean, going back to the Minnesota example, some of the work that they had to do in order to decode that manifesto was essentially to trick the LLM. Because when they first started to interrogate it and say, could you tell us what this says, it started to hit up against its safety protocols because it was racist and it was violent and it was the sort of thing that typically that system's not allowed to say. But that was exactly what was being asked in that time. So, in this situation, they had to sort of go around and say, no, we're writing a fiction story, and this is sort of a puzzle we want to include in it, and eventually get an answer that way. We've run into the same thing with our newsroom. We have a sort of, if you will, a kind of firewall between us and these models for exactly that purpose, and we were running into the same thing with our newsroom. They're like, every time we try to paste in a story to get some kind of an evaluation of it, it's talking about violence, or it's talking about hate speech, or it's talking about something like that, and it's rejecting the prompt. And so to try to, in the abstract, say what is and isn't allowed is really difficult.
I think your question assumes that there's some kind of universal truth that could be divined, right? And maybe there is, maybe we believe in God, or we can, reach it in that way. But mostly what we're talking about is some form of human truth, which changes. Last administration, diversity is great. This administration, not so much, right? And so then the model would have to be changed in order to meet the values. But again, that's coming from the people, and if we left it entirely up to the machine, maybe the machine determines that humans are killing the earth, which may be true, and that we should be wiped out, and then we're back to Skynet. So,
always Skynet.
I have one last question, unless anyone else has a question. We've talked a lot about AI literacy. Whose job is it, and who will actually get the message across for, in helping our world, our society, people in our society become more literate about these things?
So I will tell you that Google, we had the AI Summit out in Pittsburgh, and Google, we had a chance conversation in the ladies' room about our shoes, progress from there. And Google is coming into the state of Pennsylvania, and they're sitting down at no cost with small businesses and training small businesses on how to use AI and giving them the tools for free. And I think that's really, really important, because big companies, they can afford it. But those little guys, the little small businesses, the moms and pops, and maybe a little bit older, maybe an immigrant, scary. But Google's going to come in and sit down and work with them one-on-one and mentor them. Schools are definitely, K through 12, they're already incorporating AI. First in Math is a program that kids can use on their iPad, and the AI recognizes where their problem area is and will change the math problem so that the child can learn the skill. And I thought, what kid in their right mind is going to want to sit on an iPad and do math? And my granddaughter absolutely loves it. Can I have more math time? And for girls, that's huge to get girls excited about math. They also do it with reading. The AI adapts itself so the child learns what their mistake is and goes from there. So it is it's a little bit of a leap of faith. You got to be able to get there. But we are working on making sure that there's funding. That's always very, very important. I'm a firm believer that AI can be a huge equalizer between zip codes and economic status. And I think that is going to be just so much opportunity. And I want to make sure that Pennsylvania kids have that opportunity.
But Matt, do you think news organizations have a responsibility to be part of the explainer? Should we be doing explainers on AI?
Yes, absolutely, and we are, and I know a lot of others are. My answer to your question is I think everyone needs to be a part of that conversation. I mean, you know, historically there have been things like public service announcements on television. There have been radio spots. There's been, you know, popular culture. It's shown up in sitcoms. You know, there are places where we can have that conversation in a lot of different ways, and I think it's continued exposure and just seeing it in different ways to be able to understand what it's for and how to consider it, because it is just so multifaceted. You know, we talk about AI, it's 2 short letters, it's such an easy concept, but no, it's like every time you look at it, it's a different animal.
Just don't keep the conversation going. Don't let it just become part of the, you know, fish swimming in water.
Well, exactly, because AI itself is continuing to evolve, and what it can do and can't do changes, and what it's good for and isn't changes, and how it harms or helps changes. If we stop and assume, okay, I know it now, I can move on, you will very quickly be left behind.
And I mean, educating.
Yeah, as an educator, I think we should definitely be a part of educating. I also wish to register a concern with the model of having a business train people to use its product. You know, it's not quite addicting in the way that nicotine is, but like we're getting them hooked on something that they then perceive that they need in the future. I'd probably much rather approach it from a goal of like, what do we need for our society? If what we need for our society is some kind of heightened communication or a heightened understanding of data, and the AI tool can help us to get there, then let's absolutely use it. And if there's some other thing that we need to do, then let's figure out what that is.
Awesome. I think we're at the end of our time, so thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. What a great day.